Welcome to the L&D Go Beyond podcast. This season, we're digging into how skilling, smarter learning design, and emerging AI tools are reshaping real workplace capability. You'll hear practical insights from leaders tackling the gaps between training, performance, and what work now demands. Get ready to go beyond. Enjoy the conversation.
Here's a question that is worth sitting with before we even start, which is AI is influencing how we are working, how the workforce performs, what it needs to do to make the business successful. And it is also influencing how the L&D department itself works. Courses can be developed much faster, cheaper. And given all these changes, the need to make a shift towards a skills-focused operation from the traditional course delivery-focused operation has never been stronger. And my guest today has spent the last few years advocating this very shift, that is, to move the operations to focus on how to get measurable results and be aligned with the business priorities. Welcome, David. I am Venudhar, and this is the show where we go beyond the hype in the learning and development, and we're going to talk about what actually needs to change in how organizations build skills and capabilities. My guest today is David James, Chief Learning Officer at 360 Learning and one of the most recognized voices in L&D globally. His work focuses on helping organizations modernize workplace learning so it produces the results that are expected. And much of that is also what he practiced and implemented at his position as the Director of Learning, Talent, and Organization Development at the Walt Disney Company. He also hosts the Learning and Development podcast that has crossed more than 1 million downloads and is in the top 1% of the podcasts worldwide. And he has more than 35,000 LinkedIn followers. So earlier this year, he has also been awarded with the Colin Steed Award for his outstanding contribution to learning. This was at the Learning Awards organized by the Learning and Performance Institute. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Venudhar. It's a pleasure.
So here is what I want to take the conversation today with you. AI, as I said, is changing how business operate and the skills and capabilities that are expected from the workforce. The need to reskill and upskill has never been stronger, and therefore L&D needs to change the focus from course delivery to skills-focused operation. At the same time, we are also witnessing a lot of new possibilities that allow course creation in a much cheaper and a faster way. Not only that, it is also opening the possibilities of creating learning interventions in completely new formats, which were challenging or impossible to produce in the past. So that means a lot of things are changing over the L&D department, and that makes me talk about how L&D can transform itself. And we're going to cover a number of things in this podcast. My questions are going to be around the reinvention of the L&D operating model, and when making the shift to the skills-focused model, how should skills taxonomies be built and maintained? Who should own the responsibility for doing that? Collecting and reporting metrics that show that L&D departments are delivering value, and so on and so forth. With that, let's start with the bigger picture in terms of L&D as a function and its transformation. So most CLOs have actually been asked to help the businesses transform because of the impact of AI. At the same time, these CLOs are also challenged with transforming their own workforce, improving their team's capabilities, and how they work. So what should an L&D team built for the AI look like? Not just with new tools, but actually how they get things done.
Well, it is a big question, Venudhar, to start with, and I'm going to lean heavily on the work of Egla Venuschaita and Donald Taylor in my response here, because I think quite rightly you pointed out that if we apply new tools to old problems, then I think we'll miss the boat. Learning and development has operated the way that it has for decades, largely because of limited resources. But we've always known that it's never been able to deliver us the results we require at scale. It's at best provided learning at scale rather than produced results. So in a very recent report published by Egler and Donald, they highlight 3 operating models that don't operate theoretically, but this is the sum of their research across organizations globally. And their transformation triangle is made up of skills authority, enablement partner, and adaptation engine. So they're finding that the learning and development teams that are fully embracing learning and development are operating in these ways. And it's much more about the outcome rather than the intervention itself. So the first one is the skills authority, and you've touched on it already, Venudhar, and that is learning and development are the remit of learning and development is to upskill and reskill, close the skills gaps that are preventing the organization from succeeding and capitalizing on opportunities, as well as delimiting risk. So in learning and development, you could say that we've kind of aimed at upskilling or reskilling a lot of the time, but we've never held ourselves accountable for it. And I know that we'll go into a great deal of detail on that very, very shortly. But that as an aim and as an operating model is the first in the transformation triangle. The second is the enablement partner, and crudely speaking, that's about listening. So that's about capturing the know-how where it exists inside your organization, whether that be in knowledge bases, whether that be in messaging forums, whether that be recorded in calls that or meetings that are had across the organization with customers, with internal clients, or with peers, or it could be knowledge that's captured elsewhere inside your organization. And rather than that being then turned into something by learning and development, AI will be utilized to turn that local know-how into whatever format is best for the person who needs that. So that might be a podcast for somebody who just wants some insight into some decisions that affect their work. It could be a simulation if people are looking to practice in real time before needing to operate in real time. But it requires learning and development to provide the infrastructure rather than the intervention. And then the final one is in the transformation triangle is the adaptation engine, where learning and development operates more in squads rather than as, say, group L&D, and is much closer to the work, and via consulting and a product approach is integrated with where the work happens into more closely with the organization in order to affect performance and build capability. But in my recent conversation with Egler on my podcast, she said that what happens is that an organization will find its most natural path on the triangle. So whether skills authority makes most sense to begin with, or enablement partner, or adaptation engine, but inevitably and over time, they will find them moving towards each of these. So it kind of operates like an arrow, that skills authority might be the point in which momentum is built, but the enablement partner and adaptation engine will follow, because they are all based around efficacy. They are all aimed at affecting both performance and internal capability, which completely changes the USP of learning and development from learning provider to actual performance enhancement, actual capability building, and actual skills gap closure.
Absolutely. I had a look at that report and found it extremely interesting, and it lays out a clear picture, of these 3 dimensions, because it's very simple to think about just one aspect, but I think this is a comprehensive picture. And I think she also talked about how one, depending on their existing state, may start with one axis taking a priority, and then it naturally pulls and increases growth in towards the other axis and things like that. So it's very interesting read. And At the same time, this is all, again, building increased focus on the skills and capabilities, leading to the desired performance. And at the very foundation of that, I believe, is knowing what skills and capabilities need to be developed, connected with the organization's business strategy and its activities, right? But it is so easy to say that, but so difficult to build it and maintain it. And there are so many pitfalls that one can get into. So in itself, it's a big effort, but it is also complex. So while the execution, some of the things that it gets bogged down by is not just its complexity, but even shifting priorities, because skills are evolving, right? And then there's technological change where the company may change the way it does certain things with the introduction of new tools. So suddenly what you had planned for has changed, right? So what is it that we can do differently about managing, building the skills taxonomy with the help of AI, such that it gets updated and doesn't go stale?
Yeah, so again, it requires learning and development to see its role differently. So rather than L&D owning insight and development interventions, it's about providing the infrastructure, because AI right now can build dynamic skills taxonomies. So that means that once we certainly, myself, I am a huge advocate of skills-based learning around critical skills, not necessarily going organization wide without proof of concept. But the reason I said that is, if you use the example that in any given organization, you launch skills-based learning for the critical skills, they are mapped across the organization, they're validated by line managers, they are assessed to the individual themselves, which springs into a conversation, proficiency gaps and development paths. So all of that can be done, and the only manual part of that is the validation. But if that then is with the right infrastructure, that's dynamic. So if the skills are mapped because it's benchmarking thousands of job descriptions, as well as skills taxonomies outside of the organization, then as soon as there is a significant shift in a skill set, then the individual, the line manager, can be alerted to that things have changed, and quite often AI has changed the game, and so proficiency within any given skill set has changed. And so with that being alerted, another assessment can be delivered. A new proficiency gap can be highlighted, and a new development plan created. Now, that can be with very little intervention from learning and development. Again, learning and development are probably going to be smaller teams with even greater remits, and so the right infrastructure is absolutely essential. So what you were talking about with old skills taxonomies, we're going back 3, 4, 5 years, Venudhar, with it being such a manual job. And I was involved in a job family project at Disney some 12 years ago, and that was highly manual. As soon as that was printed, it was out of date. But it's just not the case. That modern AI tools means that skills are living and breathing inside the organization, inside your skills development infrastructure, in the same way as they are evolving in real life. So that there is the way that we should be thinking about learning and development now. Everything before was so static. The assessment, the mapping, the development, and if anything changed too quickly, we were out of the game. And it really was down to the individual. That's why we relied so heavily on line managers and individuals themselves. But of course, they don't have the know-how that we do. So in developing the right infrastructure, provides the right insight, helps people to laser focus on what it is that they need to be developing on. And so with the very little time that they have for their development, the infrastructure provides that insight, and all they need to do is apply their attention and their effort.
Absolutely. I think the nature of automation, or the speed with which this could be done, has become very critical. Earlier, as you rightly said, I was working with an organization, and I got a list of about, the master list carried about 3,000 plus skills. And then that too only for one function. It was for a pilot in one function. And then that had to be normalized, put the taxonomy and also put the ontology so that you could have personalized paths and so on. And it was that lasted almost a year. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but now with the use of AI, a lot of these multi-dimensional metadata that needs to be tagged with the skills can be automated in a big way. And we worked on that. And I would recommend that to anyone who's seriously looking at moving forward quickly with this transformation. Having said that, you also emphasize that the signals or the matrix that are being collected or paid attention to by the L&D and in fact all the stakeholders in the game, they have to change. The vanity matrix of completion or those that indicate participation, we all know are not good, but LMSs report and people tend to push them forward. But I think moving forward, probably we need to work with the CFOs who approve our budgets and help them understand that those vanity metrics are no longer important, or if they already are aware of that, they're going to ask us about, okay, if you are making this shift, what is it that we're going to look at to understand that there is a positive move in the right direction and it is generating value, right? So how do we get them to understand the value of investing in this move and also monitor and support as needed? Because this is not a 1 month project. This is not a 6 month project. It is actually a multi-year transition, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. What you're alluding to there, Venudhar, is the narrative that we share around the value of learning and development. But we've got to recognize that depending on the maturity of the learning and development function, there is only going to be so much data available. At one of the lowest levels of maturity, when L&D is a shop front and it provides courses, content, and a platform, all you've got is vanity metrics. That is all that you have. You have absolutely no link between consumption and impact, unless it's anecdata. And of course, that all depends on how someone feels about their consumption. So I always say to people, you've got to start somewhere. And if you're validating the investment, that might be a good way to start, because that's what people are expecting. But the next level of maturity there is proximity to the business and proximity to where conversations are happening around actual performance. And that's a really important stage, because that's where you build relationships and trust. And so instead of just looking at the vanity metrics, you might be quantifying how close you are to the business, how many bespoke solutions, how many stakeholders, how many return requests that you get from those stakeholders. Because during that period, you'll be able to turn access into influence. And that's where you start changing the narrative. So if you're invited in by the CFO, the CMO, by the CRO to talk about some of their challenges, then you've got an opportunity to say, so what's keeping you up at night? What are the things that you're accountable for that are holding you back, whether that's people, process, or communication, whatever the issue is. So you open up the conversation so they get to know you as a business problem solver rather than a learning provider. Now, that is a significant shift. We have brilliantly trained our stakeholders to know that we are the training team for decades, and we're carrying on that legacy from many other training teams. So engaging in a conversation around what the actual problems are is probably the biggest leap that you will ever make. But it comes with relationships, consulting, and showing up regularly. So it's at that stage you can start to align. When you are speaking the language of your stakeholders, you understand their pain points, and you've convinced them to give you the reins of some of those problems. That's when we can start measuring impact. So if we're aligned to what the organization's trying to do, we've got our fingerprints on improvement, then we can start telling a story about our value in a very different way. Now, it's not about correlation and causation. It's not about they had a word with the training team, we delivered something, and therefore we made impact. It's recognizing that we are part of the problem-solving solution, and that we can use that narrative to our advantage to spread that. But that is one level of impact. That's when we can start saying that we are impacting the business and we share that narrative. We've already alluded to the highest level, which is if you've got a skills-based approach across the organization and you've mapped capability, you're able to show and dictate the conversation to the board of where the organization is strong in terms of capability and skills, where there's a risk, and what you're doing in order to delimit that risk, and what you require in terms of buy-in or support in order to do that, then you're showing them you're a business leader. You're showing them a very different stage of maturity of learning and development, not one that changes every time it's presented. Let's show you this initiative. Let's show you what we've implemented now. You've got a static or a consistent agenda point that is integral to what the organization is trying to do. You've identified capability lag when the organization's talking about a strategic pivot, and then you're then talking about what it's going to take in order to increase the capability so there isn't a lag, so that execution can happen on time. It's a completely different game. Now, Venudhar, if you would say to me, how do you make that jump from vanity metrics to that capability map? Well, it takes all those stages. It takes proximity to the business, building relationships, turning access into influence, aligning L&D to the business itself, and then using that as a springboard to convince that you are a trusted pair of hands. You should be trusted with investment. That means that L&D is a predictable skills engine rather than a learning provider.
Absolutely. That sounds like a lot of things need to change, right from the mindset, and then followed by the business strategy or the functional strategy to implementation, and actually planning it systematically, right? Just thinking of making it possible versus actually being able to implement successfully are completely different things, though connected. And for some departments who have been entrenched deeply into course creation, right, where they've spent a lot of time and their resources on content production, the build cycles, the review cycles, engaging with the SMEs, a lot of that is going to change, right? And I'm also thinking that with the advancement of the authoring tools or AI-powered content creation systems, or in fact, the way the learning interventions are designed and delivered, building solutions that provide learning in the flow of the work or performance support and all of that gaining attention, it may so happen that the functional departments themselves may start using tools, the SMEs may start producing content, of course, with some support. So it lies the development of content, which in some form was already there, right? Some departments are already producing their own learning solutions, like sales teams would do have their own sales enablement programs and so on. But now this will get only amplified. So I think it is not a matter of choice whether they should reinvent their business model, but an absolute necessity. I don't want to call it the way to survive. No, that's not the right way to put it, but it's an absolute necessity. Now, given that, what are some tips that you would give to the IDs and L&D leaders on adapting and taking advantage of these new possibilities where they can actually truly not just do, but also demonstrate that they're adding value?
Yeah, so I recently had a conversation with Ross Stevenson, who gave a great answer to me on that. And he said, you have to stop identifying as a learning person. It's that is the biggest career limiter that you can make. You're a business problem solver, and you're a business problem solver by any means necessary. An ID may become extinct or marginalized, but that will come because of the over-identification with it. Now, with what a business problem solver does, they are skilled with consulting skills. They are skilled with analysis, the ability to do analysis by stealth, almost data literacy, with a product mindset. That would look to experiment regardless of what the intervention could look like, but they are laser focused on efficacy. When there's a massive distinction you're drawing here, Venudhar, between a learning provider and a business problem solver. Now, a learning provider would hope that they are solving problems, but they have very little evidence. A business problem solver hangs their hat on solving that problem and extracting evidence that was done. So it's almost as if we need to thank the learning persona and say, you've served us well to this point, but we need to move forward without you, and realize that maybe there are some tools we'll keep in our backpack just in case, but we are a business problem solver. It requires a different identity to have different conversations, to collect different data, to move forward for different solutions that deliver us a defined impact. And those are very, very distinct skill sets. But it does start with the identity. And that is the hardest thing we're going to shake off.
Right. So while entire business is actually reskilling and upskilling, given the changing way of doing business and work, particularly instructional designers within the L&D teams, we're saying they need to become problem solvers, or they have to transform themselves, which some of the skills that you highlighted that have to change, their capabilities have to evolve. It's easier said than done. So what are the top skills and capabilities that you would identify that they need to start building now, to be able to transform themselves and their role? And probably that role itself, as you said, may need to be named differently, because it begins with saying, I am this, right? And I think that is what. So two things here. What should that role be called? Right? There are a number of things that are flowing around: learning orchestrators, and or learning architects, or I mean, there are a number. I would love to hear what options you have in mind, and the top capabilities that they should be going after. This is for the instructional designers.
Yeah. So I would eliminate the word learning. I think it is one tool in the toolkit, and I think that it has limited us for a long time. I think that what is left from a bygone era, which is a relic of a bygone era, is this false equation that learning equals performance. It doesn't. Performance is way more complex, and if we believe that our role is in providing learning and then stepping back, and then everything else changes to make that learning valuable, I just think that we're redundant as a result there. So I'd be happier if it was performance. Maybe a performance partner could be useful. Performance consultant. Let's not reinvent the wheel. I think that could serve us. You could be a skills consultant. I think that could help as well, or as maybe a skills architect or skills partner. Talk about the outcome rather than the means, and I think we might get somewhere. So I think that those would help us. But in terms of top three, I would say that consulting skills are the bedrock. Too often in learning and development, we don't know what we're working on. We don't know what the problems are. We go to solution before we understand the problem, where consulting will help us get to know the problem. And if as you mentioned at the start of the show, Venudhar, solutions are faster and cheaper to make than they ever were before. There's even less excuse for making something that's not valuable. So consulting is absolutely essential. I'd say a product approach to solutions could build on that, so that we operate from a place of knowing, accessing data. So that incorporates data literacy, experimentation, iteration, and the like. And then if I could just throw in a very human skill on relationships, because our ability to build influence is absolutely critical to growing the value that learning and development can build. And that doesn't come from transactions. That comes with us having those water cooler conversations, catching up with our stakeholders to understand what's happening from their perspective, and not just being called into their office when they need some training. And so our whole emphasis on business relationships is going to be a real keystone to us developing the influence that we need to grow learning and development in our organizations.
Absolutely. I think it may be difficult to pick which one of those skills is on the highest priority. All of them, I think, deserve equal importance. And the relationships, I think, still stands out, because now you're no longer worried about, okay, what courses we got to build, how do we build them, how do we host them, and all of that. Now it is getting more complex, where you have to collaborate, get information from different systems, be able to use that system, and so many other things that will be involved in the new way of doing things. And that also brings me to this question about skills development, wherein we maintain the taxonomy, and we often see that building and maintaining that is not that easy, and where it resides can have its own pros and cons, right? So the question that come in our mind is, who should build it? Who should be responsible for maintaining the skills database? Should it be owned by HR? Should HR maintain it, or should L&D maintain? And what should L&D be doing? If the answer is that it should not, then what should L&D be doing? And I think answers to this question are very important to set the stage, right, and the plan for the next move.
Yeah. So personally, I think it's the biggest opportunity that we have in learning and development. I think that that from a power and an influence perspective, this could put us on a par with anybody else in the organization, because our power base and our influence base will be based on the criticality of people's ability to deliver their work and deliver on the strategy. Why would we miss out on that opportunity? At the moment, we come from a place of very low influence, very low credibility, and zero power. We borrow our power from HR, which borrows its power from stakeholders. So we are in an influence deficit. Now, it's hard. It is definitely hard. But if we invest in the infrastructure and the mindset, and we decide we are going to own skills, then we forge ourselves a position that we could only dream of now. So we can't be scared of hard. What we will be able to do is we will be able to develop influence that is more than buy-in. At the moment, we lean on line managers without giving anything back to help to increase the value of investments in learning. We borrow from senior leaders. We try to borrow their power to influence the workforce and managers to support our efforts with no demonstrable value. It's always begging. It's always begging for buy-in. And owning the skills agenda means that we will no longer need to beg for buy-in, because we are already working on the most important thing across the organization, which is the organization's ability to deliver on the strategy. So as hard as it is, it's L&Ds, and the most critical part of it is infrastructure, because we can't do this manually. So it goes back to what I mentioned before. The first shift is mentality and mindset, that we want to own the skills agenda. Secondly, it's infrastructure, so that it's plugged in and AI does the hard work of maintaining the taxonomies. But because it's dynamic and it responds to changes that go on in the market, then the right infrastructure would alert the right people. And so L&D is no longer providing the administration behind skills strategy, but it's providing the narrative and it's delivering the results.
Absolutely. And that brings me to the second aspect that you highlighted, right? The infrastructure. And where is it that this critical data and the signals that flow from one location to another to allow it to manage and maintain the skills intelligence engine, how does it all work? And I know LMS, LXP, and other platform vendors are looking forward to, and are aware of this need that L&D departments have or organizations have. And in response, many of them have bolted certain features onto their existing platforms. And I have personally seen a number of them. And while they look okay, they are at a very basic level, often not so rich in comparison what is actually required to make this plan successful, right? And in combination with that, the motive is also saying, how can I promote my generic course library by connecting them to the skills that you may want the organizations to build, and therefore continue to push the generic courses. Now, again, in my view, generic courses are good as a foundation, but the context comes from which is the context of the business and how they do it. That does not come with the generic courses. And a lot of that is also important. So the question here is, how can organizations truly evaluate these systems and not essentially think that, okay, this is a skills focused LMS. They say that this is there are some basic features, but I think they need to get better at evaluating what is it that will make the best skills intelligence engine that is designed to work for their context, their needs, right? And not just any off-the-shelf product.
Yeah, and I think that's that what you allude to there, Venudhar, is what direction L&D is coming from. If they're looking to just improve the L&D offering now, you can see how adding a layer of say, I don't want to even call it skills intelligence, but bolt-on skills functionality, then that's just to improve the investment that they've made in the generic courses. So you can see how it would seem like a logical progression, but the most important part, and I think that I'm joining the dots, I think this is what you're talking about, Venudhar, is you need to design your end point. So if I was talking there and saying, I want to be able to share with my C-suite our current capability across the organization and our ability to deliver on the strategy. I want to show them where we're strong on skills. I want to show them where we've got room to grow, and I want to show them improvement over time. Now, that's a completely different, I mean, that is a highly ambitious aim. But if you are buying skills, technology to validate your investments from before, you are years and years away from that end game. So my advice is be ambitious, design your end game right now, and then trust yourself that you'll get there. Maybe even do a backward plan to say, what do we need to achieve before we get there? Because you are going to, in 3 years' time, you are going to look back having achieved a hell of a lot more if you've been ambitious and worked backwards, rather than if you believe that your organization will just accept you making one step at a time, because that one step at a time will leave you 3 years still as far away as you are today from the ultimate aim of a skills-based approach.
Right. And so what it also means is I need to be mindful of how am I going to show value that I'm planning to deliver and I'm delivering it. And we did speak a little while ago about the shift from the vanity matrix into newer matrix, right? And the skills infrastructure that we're talking about will therefore require capturing signals from other platforms. They could be CRMs, they could be other systems like procurement systems, or depending on the functions, the system that they work with. And some of that data could inform if there has been a change in behavior or there has been a change in performance, and so on and so forth. So, like you said, we need to begin with the end game, understand how is it that the solutions can be built to move the needle on a particular metric and so on. So the thought process has to change. Begin with the end in mind, and what is it that will indicate the shift. And so while we have known this and discussed this for a long time, it has been really challenging for L&D leaders. It's not that they have not been aware, right? They've always wanted to prove their worth and what their efforts are leading to, or what value is being created. But it has not been possible for many of them. So what do you think are the barriers that they are facing in making it possible?
The biggest one, Venudhar, is influence. Short and sweet, it's influence, because we don't know in learning and development how to build influence. We think that it is to build the solutions that are requested or designed to address the symptoms that have been identified, but that doesn't. That leaves us in exactly the same position as we were before we got involved. Building influence requires us to take really seriously the politics, influence, and power that are currency across our organizations. Now, we build that with our interactions, and we build that with the story of our impact, but also in plotting our progression and our maturity inside our organization. So, in short, the expected and requested version of learning and development, Venudhar, is very popular because it requires very little effort and change from everybody inside the organization. It is attending courses and completing content. That's it. Everybody's really happy. Managers send their workforce. The workforce can consume something interesting, and they can decide whether to change or not. And for leaders, it is a physical manifestation of their belief of investing in people. Everybody's happy because nobody has to try. But as soon as you start thinking about learning and development that actually works, then it's hard. Venudhar, you clearly speak You're clearly multilingual. I'm a musician, so we know how hard learning is, but learning and development is easy. So what we've traded is our credibility for popularity. So we need to break away from that, and the way that we do that is we need to aim for efficacy all the time. What we do works. Now we need to also put at the front of our minds and our priorities building credibility and building that influence, using those interactions to recognize that if we take an order, then we trade credibility, because what we're saying is L&D is easy and I'm going to take responsibility for the failure. So we need to invest in our consulting, our confidence in our consulting, product mindset rather than delivery mindset, so that we hold ourselves accountable for actual results. And then when we make those results, we control the narrative to make sure that we amplify those messages, or even better, we get our stakeholders to amplify those messages for us, so that we're known for efficacy, that we're known for more, but we're taking the organization somewhere it doesn't want to go, somewhere outside of its comfort zone. But we need to aim further, because the result when we get there, when we've got a capability map of our organization, will be worth us getting there. But it's hard. And many of us don't consider the political dimensions, the influence that we need to build, because we're in an influence deficit most of the time, and take power seriously. And it's something that L&D people who are more of a social and an artistic leaning rather than a corporate leaning. But it's almost as if we need to satisfy the social and the artistry on one side, whilst taking the organizational politics and influence seriously on the other. Now, the good news is, Venudhar, the first book on power, influence, and politics is published next year, which I'm currently writing, which lays this out about the power deficit. But this is why, Venudhar, in short, learning and development finds itself in a similar position, regardless of geography, regardless of industry, and regardless of organization. It finds itself there because the types of people attracted to the roles, our belief and overinvestment in certain types of transactions and interactions with people that we find valuable that they don't, and an underinvestment in politics and influence.
Great. And I think I loved the answer. And one of the reasons is, most often what happens is people think that the barriers are technical in nature, integrating systems and all of that. But that's the easy part. In fact, the easiest part, isn't it? I mean, either if they don't have internal capability to connect the systems and collect the information, or even first to identify what information needs to be collected and from where, that is also easy. And then to build that technical infrastructure is also easy. If you can't do it internally, you could get a company like us to do it, but it's all possible and not that difficult. But what is difficult is actually getting everybody to be on the same page, to collaborate, build that influence so that you can bring everybody together and support the entire, the mission, as I would call it, right? So absolutely, I agree with that. That is the top, requirement or the barrier, that if you don't have influence, this is not going to be possible. Right. So finally, I think we come to the last question that I have for you, which is that every CLO, whenever I talk to them, there's so much they would like to do and get done, but there's always limited budget, right? And their current priorities as of now, in addition to what they have been doing, is AI fluency for the L&D teams, setting up the skills intelligence engine as we just spoke about, or building new AI native learning experiences, because they need to step beyond the standard unit of learning, which is courses and modules, towards simulations or practice related, resources and so on and so forth. So a lot of more opportunities are there, or needs are there, that need to be funded, resourced. So it's no longer it's no longer easy. It was not easy earlier as well. So if you would say this should be the highest priority, which one of those would be? And if they should be done in a certain order to be able to manage it, what would that order be like? or should it be done all together? I don't know. So please help us. It's a difficult.
A nice, easy question, Venudhar, to end with. Look, the most important thing to remember here, Venudhar, is context is everything. And I think it's important that you understand where you are in terms of your learning and development function, in terms of your maturity and perception inside your organization, and then plot a route forward. I developed a maturity model last year, which maps this out, and my book is based across this as well. That if you understand where you are, what is constraining you, and what is empowering you, but also what the next levels of maturity look like, and in very modern terms as well. So one that respects the AI landscape as well. Then you can maneuver your way through this, because the hardest thing to do in learning and development is believe that there is something else that you can achieve and your organization can accept. But if you recognize these as stages of maturity, then you can plot that, and then you can pull together a 3 to 5 year plan. And my goodness, your organization and its leadership will thank you for that, as well as your L&D team, because they know that they're doing something rewarding and impactful.
Right. And absolutely. And I just add a more detailed, sort of response to that is that, while there is this need for AI fluency of the team itself, or to build additional resources, they should not, we cannot wait for that to happen, because the ball is already rolling. The need to make the shift towards the skills and capabilities, as I said, it should have been done as of yesterday. Right.
Yeah.
So the first priority, if I were to do it, would be putting on setting up the skills intelligence engine and whatever it takes to do that, building a plan on that. And in doing so, obviously considering the use of AI and other technological advancements. And in the process, if third parties are involved, there is always a chance that you collaborate and your team learns with what they observe or participate in, and become AI fluent in the process, or discover newer possibilities that are being extracted from what is happening around other enterprises and so on and so forth. So I would prioritize that, okay, build what you really have to do today, and then your capabilities will keep moving, they'll keep changing, but you take help, but don't stop working at it, right? And so that's not how I would put, but of course, each of that would require resources and budget allocations, right? So yeah, thank you so much. I think this has been an extremely interesting, but more importantly, very valuable conversation, I'm sure, where it sets the direction, not just about what to do, but more importantly, how to think about things. What does the future for L&D department look like, and how we can prepare itself to make that transformation. So thank you so much for sharing your valuable direction and advice. And I'm sure a lot of people who are going to listen to this are going to benefit from that. Thank you.
Thanks, Venudhar.